Dan Quinn is done as the Cowboys defensive coordinator, and now the conversation turns to who's the new defensive coordinator? The number one guy on this list I had felt pretty good about going into the news. Now I'm not so sure. We'll explain why on today's show. But when the Cowboys hire a new defensive coordinator, we will have you guys covered. Hit that sub button, whether we're live, on demand, or at home because I'm watching baby Olivia, we'll make the video happen. Hit that sub button for me right now. We're going to take a look now at the top Dan Quinn replacements, and I would fully expect at least a couple different interviews, and we'll break down these guys as they get interviewed and go more in depth in them as it happens. But the overarching viewpoint here for the Cowboys as they look to replace Dan Quinn, number 10 is Anthony Weaver. And I love to get Weaver on this coaching staff. I'm not sure he's going to get the Ravens DC job, which means two things. One, maybe you don't want him as the Cowboys defensive coordinator, but he had head coaching interviews. So there's kind of a weird dichotomy there. I would also say this, and I'll make this point overall early on here. I don't think this is going to be a very attractive job. I don't think with a lame duck head coach, you're going to land the top candidates. So Weaver or Chris Orr or Chris Hewitt, all defensive coaches, would be great names. My expectations are low. Number 9 is Brandon Staley. As of filming, has been linked to the Rams and Dolphins jobs because Shanahan McVay, go figure, right? Makes some sense. Would not be shocked if he ends up back as the Rams defensive coordinator again. Historically speaking, Mike McCarthy has liked former head coaches as his defensive coordinator. He likes experience. I get it. It's understandable. I wonder if a totally outside hire with no real connections to this coaching staff, this head coach, or this front office, i.e. the Jones boys, is a route the Cowboys would end up pursuing. Obviously, more names to go. Who do you want as the next Cowboys defensive coordinator? It'll be the pinned comment on today's video. If the ad comes here on YouTube, take advantage of it. Head down there and let me know who you want to hire as the Cowboys' next DC. Number 8 on our list is Mike Pettine, who, by the way, has already served as a defensive coordinator under Mike McCarthy. He had been hired back in 2018 by McCarthy. Of course, that did not last very long as Mike got fired and was very brief. He stayed in Green Bay for a few years after that. Had previously been a head coach with the Cleveland Browns. Has been the Bears senior defensive assistant, is currently the Vikings assistant head coach, although obviously Brian Flores runs that defense. By the way, you are not getting a sitting defensive coordinator for an NFL team. Not going to happen. Don't get your hopes up there. Pettine has ties. Worth mentioning. Number 7 is Shane Bowen, the Titans defensive coordinator, who we'll talk about Vrabel later on, I promise for you. For now, Shane Bowen kind of is he was the defensive coordinator. Sounds like Tennessee's going in a different direction. Opens up a job for him going somewhere else. 37 years old. He's very young. I thought the Titans defense was pretty good under him. Seems valuable. Another name I'll mention here briefly, Chris Harris is the passing game coordinator. He's available. The Titans a couple days ago had said, hey, we're going to keep him. We're not going to let him interview. We're going to block him for now. Callahan's going to hire one of the Ravens DB's coaches. So it seems like Bowen is now available for potential jobs. Today's show is made possible by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. It's just you against the numbers. You are not battling thousands of other players. There's no pros and sharks and sharps, etc. It's just you against the numbers. Can you come out on top? I love the flex play more than anything. But sometimes PrizePicks gives you little bonuses. For example, half a passing yard for Patrick Mahomes. So I'm not doing the flex play here. I'm going all in power play with half a passing yard for Mahomes. 88.5 yards on the ground for Christian McCaffrey and 7 catches for Travis Kelce. I'm going the more than on all of those. You can join my picks at PrizePicks and get a first deposit match up to $100. Link will be in the comments section and the description of today's show. That's prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS for the first deposit match up to $100. Number 6, Don Wink Martindale, the former Giants defensive coordinator. Obviously, I think maybe one of the bigger names on this list because everyone knows Wink because Ian Rappaport constantly pushes him as a head coach candidate, by the way, even though they just agency stuff. Fell apart with the Giants. This is noteworthy to me because he's never been a long-term DC. The Ravens defense got better once they fired him, by the way. I think, by the way, there's been no buzz on Don Martindale getting DC interviews. It's been so quiet that maybe you actually could land him. Maybe there aren't going to be a bunch of teams falling over themselves to hire Martindale. Now that the head coaching jobs are sorted, I think we'll get more traction there across the board, but I wouldn't necessarily totally rule that out. Number 5, and I'm going to asterisk this one here. This would be my dream defensive coordinator hire. That's why it's 5. Ejiro Evero, the Panthers DC. The Panthers at their press conference today said they expected Evero to come back. There was also a report that Evero didn't want to come back. So there's some interesting stuff going on there. I'd say probably unlikely. But if the Panthers do go in a new direction, then Evero would be a home run hire. I just think that he'll probably find somewhere with more job stability. I don't think he wants to go into another year of having Evero having my head coach got fired again. That's not a fun place. He's done it 4 years in a row in that scenario. 2 with Carolina, 1 in Denver. That's not fun for him. Number 4 is Al Harris, the Cowboys defensive backs coach. Is worth mentioning, as we filmed this moments ago, Trayvon Diggs is advocating for Al Harris as defensive coordinator. I think this is a possibility. I would wonder, depending on what happens with the number 1 guy on this list, if Harris jumps up the board a little bit. I will make note, not on the list, Adden Dirty is worthy of conversation here as well, but he's such a Dan Quinn guy at his core, having been with him for so long. I would bet of all your guys, I think Dirty is the one most likely to follow Quinn. Who knows? Could be very wrong. Harris, I know the players love him. They love Adden Dirty, by the way, as well. The concern here is he hasn't done a lot of, coordinating stuff. He's been a technique guy more so than he's been a tactician guy. That would be a red flag. With that said, if you don't interview him, I think you're making a mistake as an organization. So prediction time. Do you think the Cowboys just promote someone? Y for yes, N for no. Get those predictions in for me in the comments section right now. Number 3, Ron Rivera, the former Commanders head coach. This had come out last weekend that the Cowboys could interview Rivera. Is worth mentioning, at minimum, to fulfill the Rooney Rule, you must interview one outside defensive coordinator option. I would be disappointed in this organization if they only interviewed like 3 guys and hired somebody. That seems kind of like a bad way to go about it. I would like to interview more people, give you more insight. Could also help you out maybe next year when you're doing a full head coaching search. I don't want Rivera as my head coach. Is also worth mentioning there is a tie to this front office. The Cowboys interviewed Ron Rivera way back when for their head coaching job when Wade Phillips got the job. So that is worth a conversation. I would be pretty whelmed by Ron Rivera, though. Number 2 is Mike Zimmer. This might be a bit bold. I wouldn't rule it out. This would also kind of be more of the front office made the call a little bit. They love Mike. He, of course, was a former Cowboys defensive coordinator years ago in the Bill Parcells era. Has been out of coaching for a few years now after the Vikings fired him. Had things gone differently timing-wise, had the Vikings fired Zimmer and not kept him in their own playoff run a couple years ago, I think he would have been your head coach at this time. Not McCarthy. They would have hired Mike over him. Timing didn't work out. McCarthy knows him well from their NFC North battles. It's an outside hire if you miss on the guy that seemingly is your top option, who maybe isn't as much of a lock that it was a little bit ago. So we'll get to number one here in a moment, but what is your confidence level here in the Commanders and the Cowboys hiring a better defensive coordinator than Dan Quinn? Scale it for me from 1 to 10 in the comments section. Number one is Joe Whitt. And this has been very weird in the immediate aftermath of this situation. Number one, the local media, and I've heard this too, has been Joe Whitt is the top option. Joe Whitt is the number one guy for this team. He is the top internal promotion candidate. He coached with Mike McCarthy for so long. It makes sense that's this team's guy. National media instantaneously, after the news came out of Quinn leaving, he's going to go with Dan Quinn to the Commanders. And the Cowboys were like, don't say that quickly. Dallas might keep him. So we've got differences of opinion here. Is he the Commanders DC or the Cowboys DC? I would bet he gets one of them. But that's fascinating that the immediate differences in the reporting doesn't happen very often. Curious how that all ends up playing out in the end. I know you're going, what about Bill Belichick? He's not going to be a defensive coordinator. You think his ego would allow for that? I don't. What about Mike Vrabel? I love it. He'd be a great defensive coordinator hire. Except for the fact that A, I don't think he wants to be a DC. B, specifically for Dallas. I know the argument is like, he's your next head coach. That's not a good thing, guys. You think this organization with this head coach in particular is like, yes, to save my job, I will hire a better head coach than myself. That's not a good idea. Like, that's not a good path for keeping your job. Because if you do have grade 6, they're going to give him the credit anyway. And if your offense collapses again, you're out. The new DC's in. So like in a bubble, Mike Vrabel is DC. I love it. In the he's your next head coach, I'm on board. He's the Cowboys defensive coordinator, I'm not going to get my hopes up. And I think it would be dysfunction. And I kind of don't want dysfunction more than what we already have in Dallas.